Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, and we are so happy to have you with us on what is going to be an incredibly busy show. So we're going to have some fun off the top, laughing at Florida based on something that a Georgia player has said. You're going to like this. Many of you may have already seen it. We're also going to get deep into some of what is expected to go on with UGA recruiting here over the course of the next couple of days. And spoiler alert, it expects to be busy. I'm going to give you more reason to be angry, and we'll do this we'll laugh as we do this, but the same media types who seem to be doing everything they can to doubt Georgia for the upcoming season, more logs on that fire here today, so we will kind of put that in the spotlight. Continuing conversations that have been ongoing a little bit this week. The former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm joins the show today. I've already said that. Jake Fromm is going to be here today. And before we're done, I'll obviously take a couple of minutes to address a topic on the mind of a lot of Georgia fans. We'll make sure we do that before we wrap up. But we're going to keep it fun and light around all of that, though, because we are moving into a holiday weekend. So what do you say we get it started? By the way, on the subject of the holiday weekend, so we are back here on Monday, but we're going to be off on Tuesday. That's the 4th of July. That's our nation's birthday, Independence Day as it is known. So we'll celebrate America on Tuesday with no show. We'll give our staff a chance to be off and enjoy their time with family and friends. But Monday we will be here. So y'all, when you're sort of waking up in a hungover stupor, don't forget to slide over here and get on DawgNation Daily, because we'll be here live for you at 10 a.m. just like we always do. So that is going to be the situation there. So with all of that said, let's do it today. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We have got so much to do today, and we're going to try to fit it all in, of course, the next few minutes. But I want to begin with something just sort of fun and light. We're kind of moving into a holiday weekend. Some of y'all aren't working today. Some of you aren't working on Monday. Some of you are obviously off on Tuesday there as well. Like, what is that, a 5-day weekend? Is that how many days that is? Or is that a 6-day weekend? 5-day weekend. Some of y'all have managed to turn 4th of July into a 5-day weekend this year. And if you have, congratulations to you for that. But we're here for you nonetheless, working hard as we always do. And in spirit of fireworks, 4th of July, Independence Day, cookouts, and things like that, what do you say we just do something kind of fun here just for a moment? Some of y'all shared this with me, and I'm going to share it with you. When I post the show later on, I'll give you a link to the interview, to the conversation, because it really is really good. So Jordan Hall, terrific defensive lineman at Georgia now, from the state of Florida, choosing Georgia over Florida. Big recruiting battle win there. Well, he was on the podcast interview that Tate Ratledge is a part of, and used to be our buddy Rylan Godey was there, part of that. Rylan has now gone on to Mississippi State, so I guess Rylan has been replaced by Zion Lowe. So this podcast is going to live on with Godey no longer there, and I guess Godey's probably got his own media plans over in Starkville, Mississippi now too, where he'll play this year. We wish him well as he does that. But, for a long time, Tate, who's a funny guy, and Rylan, who's a terrific, entertaining, funny guy, they'd bring on other Georgia players, and kind of the NIL world in which we live in, you have these sort of relaxed, unfettered, I don't want to say off the record because they're being recorded, but off the cuff conversations. Maybe that's what I mean to say there. And, not everybody loves every aspect of this sort of new world we live in college football, but this to me is an example of kind of something that's pretty good. We see the personality of players in a way that we otherwise might not. And so Zion Logue and Tate Ratledge are interviewing Jordan Hall. And the subject comes up, and people sent this to me right away because I'm a fairly easy person to read here. I am not the most mysterious person out there. The stuff that you think I would like, I pretty well do like, and I'm pretty straightforward about stuff like that. We've made our bones, our buddy Eddie the Blind Squirrel, and everything else we do around here. We've made our bones about the fact that we are unabashed Gator haters. We believe a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. And so when something like this happens, people just immediately start sending it to me, including our buddy Anthony White, who sent this to me. So Jordan Hall is on there talking with Zion and Tate about why he didn't go to Florida. And I don't know. Sometimes you just sort of sit back and relax, let the commentary speak for itself here. Jordan giving the absolute best reason of all why UGA was the right choice for him and not those lousy, stinking Gators. So we say, Jordan, welcome to the DawgNation family here, and certainly we appreciate your great thoughts here. Let's hear Jordan Hall on with Tate Ratledge and Zion Logue.
Yeah, let's talk about your recruitment. What was the turning factor that got you to the University of Georgia?
Really, Florida talk about a lot of nothing. So I was like, Georgia talk about a lot of something. They're going to put people in the league. Florida ain't put a D-lineman in the league since Taven Bryan, and he's terrible. So, hey, I'm going to Georgia.
I mean, how much do you love that? Like, how much would you just love to, like, sort of bottle that up and just sort of share that with every Georgia fan you possibly could? That, hey, when I went to take a visit to Florida, they talked about a lot of nothing. When I went and visited Georgia, they talked about a lot of something. Florida hadn't put a defensive lineman in the league since Taven Bryan, and he's terrible. You hear Tate Ratledge laugh on the heels of Jordan Hall saying what he said there. And I'm sorry, sometimes it's just for fun, and this is one of those things from Jordan Hall that's just sort of for fun. You like the idea of Hall saying, I responded well to the Georgia recruiting pitch. Florida really didn't have much of a recruiting pitch because what I'm looking to see is sort of proof of concept. Can you get me where I want to go? Florida does not have a history of doing that. Georgia does. Therefore, Georgia ultimately was the right choice for me, and I think that's great. And I guess to put kind of a football spin on this for a moment, because, you know, you probably need to do that a little bit. This is what I do think is interesting with the current world in which we live in, is that there's this entirely new category introduced for why a player might want to go somewhere. And I do think the ability to self-select, the ability to kind of make a choice on the front end about the situation that's going to be right for me, I do think that creates a scenario where we're going to kind of see some interesting movement and shifts around college football. Like, as we've said over and over again, Georgia just isn't for everybody. And if you're like mega into like brand building and mega into, I'm talking about not the fact that you can't build a brand, but if you're more into brand building than you are like personal development, if you're more into, hey, look at how many TikTok whatever I have, as opposed to, hey, you know, look where I'm kind of ranked in terms of future NFL prospects. If you're more into the sizzle and less interested in the steak, if you're more interested in the hat and less interested in the cattle, if you're more interested in some of that sort of, you know, touchy-feely stuff as opposed to like the actual nuts and bolts of football, then Georgia probably isn't for you. And a guy like Jordan Hall said, when I went to Florida, they were talking about, as he says, a bunch of nothing. It's all, you're left to conclude, some sort of like, I don't know, peripheral type stuff, you know, being pitched and, hey, come here, you can do this, and come here, and you can do that. Or at Georgia, it's the simplest, most straightforward pitch of all. If you are willing to come here and work hard, if you're willing to work as hard as Devontae Wyatt did, as hard as Jordan Davis did, as hard as Trayvon Walker did, slightly different position fits in some cases, but if you're willing to work as hard as those guys did, if you're willing to kind of put in the grind coming back off an injury the way that Jalen Carter did a year ago, Kirby Smart talking about his sort of competitive character and his willingness to compete, even when his draft status for the most part was probably fairly well secured, that if you're willing to do all those kinds of things, then you will have a chance to enjoy the same riches those guys enjoyed. That's the kind of something, apparently, that Georgia was talking about in its recruiting pitch to Jordan Hall, and he says was an easy decision for him to make. And if you're a Georgia fan, I think you really love that. So we wanted to start the show by having some fun with that here today. Now, let me shift gears to something completely different for a moment, because I told you we are very busy here on this Friday. And by the way, DawgNation may actually be a very busy place moving past DawgNation Daily here today on throughout this holiday weekend. So while you're stuffing your face with brats and burgers and everything else, DawgNation's going to be watching the world of the 2024 recruiting cycle here, because it seems like Georgia could be set up to be very busy here over the course of the next few days. And a lot of this seems to center on one position group in particular. And I want to go back to Wednesday here for a moment. Normally Jeff Sintel joins us on Fridays on our show, but because we felt like there had been a lot of recruiting stuff that had happened over the course of the weekend, I had been out of town last weekend, you might remember that. Because a lot of that had been going on, we sort of felt the need to move Jeff's weekly appearance up to Wednesday of this week. But something that he said then is worth revisiting, I think, now, especially as we move into the weekend. Georgia about to learn a lot about one position group in particular in terms of the future of the program as it relates to recruiting. This is what Jeff Sintel said about that when he joined us on Wednesday.
They might get 3 or 4 this month, at the minimum, Brandon, with a lot of names about to pop. And I think the biggest thing is Georgia's going to know where its offensive line room is. Stacey Searles is trying to get a lot like Todd Hartley and have all his homework done by the time fall practice rolls around. And there are three names. We mentioned Nair Daniels on July 4th. You've got, Michael Ooney, who just took his official visit to Georgia this weekend. You mentioned him. He's set to make his decision on June the 30th. There's Marquez, Big Kaz Easley on July the 8th. Who, Brandon, if he does end up becoming a dog, you'd love that because he drops the top three that doesn't include the dogs in there.
Sure.
And then maybe if it's the dogs, they come out of the blue like somebody from your favorite pro wrestling memories of a guy coming into the ring, running down the alley from backstage. There's a lot of work left to do on the offensive line class.
So that's Jeff Sintel kind of setting the stage there, including today when Jeff said that on Wednesday, previewing what's going to happen on Friday, which is now today, and Michael Uini here today making that commitment announcement. Now, in the case of Uini, that's not a name that we've necessarily, I think, talked about maybe even as much as we should. But in terms of kind of where he ranks as a prospect, you're talking about a pretty big deal here. Uini, the number 130 prospect overall, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. He is the number 8 offensive tackle. It's the example of the kind of big-time recruiting wins that Georgia fans are always looking for along those lines of scrimmage and offensive line here in particular. I told you yesterday that I sort of felt like if you're looking at the overall number 1 strength for Georgia here this year, I think offensive line is it. And I think when you look back on, how it is that Georgia has won the last 2 national championships, I also believe that the offensive line has kind of been an underrated, under-discussed part of that. We give our attention to the 5 first-round picks on defense in 2021, and obviously what Georgia did to replace those guys in 2022. Stetson Bennett sort of standing up, becoming a historic figure in this program. He gets a lot of attention for that there as well. You talk about Todd Monken. You talk about all the things that were in place for Georgia these last couple of years, and all of those things are worthy of being discussed, of course. But the elite nature of the Georgia offensive line, the way that Broderick Jones' insertion into the national championship game in 2021, the way in which his emergence as a full season starter last year, and what happened for the Georgia offensive line as those transitions took place. Jamari Salyer no longer here. Jones in a bigger role. The same way that Amarius Mims had to step in when Warren McClendon got hurt at the end of last season. The depth that Georgia had at the offensive line, its ability to play at an elite level on a consistent basis over the course of the last 2 seasons. To me, that has been as much of a bedrock component to Georgia's national championship success as almost anything has been, and I don't know that it's always been fully considered, and I don't know that's been always fully credited the role the offensive line has played. And I believe that can be true again this year, and I told you that yesterday. So when you understand the backdrop of how important the offensive line spot has been for Georgia, the idea that it's kind of also having the chance to add these big recruits, the likes of which Jeff just mentioned, including Uini today. The one name that Jeff does not mention there is Daniel Calhoun. I believe we're now also looking at July 5th on the Daniel Calhoun front here to make his announcement there as well. And that's one of those things that has some double value to Georgia because you're also talking about that being one of those big name in-state wins there too. Georgia fans like to see Georgia kind of control some action there in the Peach State. Calhoun kind of represents that at Walton High School now, but it also represents that high value offensive tackle-like prospect that I think has just sort of set Georgia apart from the rest of its competition. As we've said, go look at a program like Ohio State, who has been desperate in the transfer portal to try to find offensive line help. Go look at a lot of the SEC competition that Georgia faces, Auburn, Florida, teams like that. Pretty much almost anybody with the exception of Alabama are right now in the SEC. They were all very interested in adding from the transfer portal because they didn't have enough offensive linemen. And in the transfer portal this year, that meant Tulsa, it meant FIU, it meant Oklahoma State. It meant less than kind of the elite teams. Look at the offensive linemen who are getting drafted. This past year's draft is a good example of that. Not a lot of transfer portal names among those drafted offensive linemen here this year because programs that find really good ones have a tendency to do anything they can to hold on to them. And very few programs feel like they've got enough offensive line depth. Georgia is, I think, maybe the rare exception to that, where the depth for the Georgia offensive line has been strong. You've had capable starters at the offensive tackle spot, but you've had capable backups ready to step in when those guys have gotten hurt. And ensuring that remains true in the future is a big part of the formula for future success for UGA there as well. And as Jeff Sintel previewed on Wednesday, the next few days with at least 4 pretty big offensive line type names set to make their commitment, including Calhoun in a couple of days, Uini today. 4 big names set to make their commitment announcements here very soon. Georgia's in line potentially to get all of them. Now, listen, recruiting's fun and weird, and sometimes things happen that you don't necessarily expect, so I'm not going to make any kind of bold projection here. We'll leave that to the experts like Jeff Sintel. But eyes open for a lot of big ads to the 2024 class, and over the course of the next couple of days, a lot of that happening around the offensive line. You better believe that's the case. So Dawg Nation better get buckled up for a very busy July. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented today by Kroger, and we are happy to have you with us. No matter how you get to us, live on video, 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all kinds of video platforms, all kinds of ways for you to join our program. We just really appreciate you doing that. Our friends in the radio in Athens, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, we are happy to be with you there as well. We love our folks there in the Classic City, and a podcast available to you on Apple, Spotify. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Y'all, we do everything we can to make our show as accessible as possible, and we're just so grateful and so thankful that you guys continue to choose to be a part of what we do here at Dawg Nation. We don't take that for granted. We take that very, very seriously. Whatever platform you try to you like to use, we're just happy you find us somehow, some way, and your continued support of Dawg Nation, something that makes us very, very thankful. I truly, truly appreciate that. And I appreciate your support of our friends at Kroger there as well, especially this particular weekend. I was joking with our video audience about this a little earlier. So we're coming up on 4th of July weekend. A lot of you got a lot of time off. You're getting ready to enjoy that. That means cookouts. That means all the fun stuff that goes there. And that means checking with our friends at Kroger to get stocked up. The food that you put on the grill, the plates, the napkins, all that kind of stuff, the side dishes, the beverages, whatever you got going on here for this 4th of July weekend, Independence Day weekend, starting today, rolling all the way through Monday, Tuesday, Kroger's going to help you get stocked up on all of that. So you can go to Kroger.com. You can find out about special savings. You can stop by in store and just really get into it. I love this time of year. I love the 4th of July. I love the red, white, and blue decorations. Came home the other day. My wife had put out flags all over the place. Our neighborhood kind of does some of that kind of stuff too. A lot of your neighborhoods do there as well. I just love to see Old Glory flying this time of year, and love to see all the folks getting ready to enjoy family and friends and a great 4th of July weekend. So as you get stocked up for the stuff to put in the cooler, the stuff to put on the grill, and everything else, our friends at Kroger got you covered on all of that. So, by the way, speaking of the 4th of July, let me give you a little bit of housekeeping note here just for a moment. So today is Friday. On Monday, we're talking about July 3rd. We're actually going to be here on the 3rd. So normal show on Monday. We will be off on Tuesday. So 4th of July holiday, we're going to take that off and celebrate our nation's birthday with all of you by being off on Tuesday, letting our staff have some time with family and friends. We're going to do that with them then. But on Monday, we're here like normal. So if you're off from work or whatever else, on Monday, just know that we're going to deliver the show exactly the way we always do. On Tuesday, we're not going to do a pre-record or anything like that because, like I said, we're going to observe that holiday and enjoy and celebrate that holiday. And then on Wednesday, we're sort of back to normal and kind of ready to roll through on all of that. One more housekeeping note to give you just for a moment. I played a clip from Jeff Sintel's appearance from Wednesday here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. That means today we get a chance to have a very special guest, a Kroger Fresh Take, with former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. A lot to get into with Jake, including some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. It's always great to talk to Jake Fromm and have some fun with all of that, and we will do that here coming up in just a little bit. Prior to that, though, how about we go around the Dawghouse? Served up today by the Finnish Long Drink. By the way, speaking of things that go well with the 4th of July, you better believe the Finnish Long Drink is an example of that. And coming up in just a moment, I've got a really fun announcement from our friends, the Finnish Long Drink, I'm going to give to you. That is going to be a great time. However, prior to that, the mood changes. The music tone completely alters. I have more bad news to give you in terms of media expert types, college football pundits, commentariat, who just once again sort of seem to doubt Georgia here a little bit. And I regret to inform all of you here who are tuned into Around the Dawghouse, presented by the Finnish Long Drink here today, that apparently way up north in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the maize and blue of the Michigan Wolverines, y'all, apparently what is it the kids say these days? Apparently Michigan is a wagon. Apparently Michigan is not going to be able to be stopped. Apparently they are going to be an unstoppable, unbeatable team here this season. We've already been warned about that from, Bruce Feldman, the fancy writer, who told us that yesterday. And now we have a guy in Rece Davis, who we've kind of talked about before here. ESPN College Game Day host. Rece, kind of a Southern guy, went to an SEC school, working for the flagship network of the SEC now. You'd sort of think that if anybody was going to have an eye of skepticism towards what's apparently being built by Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, a guy like Davis might be a candidate to do that. But once again, on the Paul Finebaum show this week, Davis sort of doubling down on his idea that it ain't Georgia who's going to be the best team here this year. It's going to be Michigan. He said on a podcast of the day, we played the clip for you at the time, that Michigan was his preseason number one. And Rece Davis yesterday on the Paul Finebaum show, or I think it was yesterday, it was someday this week, I believe it was yesterday. Rece Davis on the Paul Finebaum show, once again explaining his reasoning for why the Wolverines, gosh, y'all, they just may be unbeatable here this season. This is Rece Davis on with Paul Finebaum.
McCarthy's potentially an elite player. And if he can take that next step to that, then I think that gives Michigan a chance. But before the Georgia fans call in and say, that I don't know what I'm talking about, it's Big Ten, Georgia has a better roster top to bottom. There's no question about that. But I want to see the quarterback play, and I don't think that's too much to ask. Same deal at Ohio State, same deal at Alabama as well.
So, as we've been saying now, because we did this with like the Bruce Feldman thing yesterday, we did this with the Kirk Herbstreit stuff the other day, like our only request is some sort of like logical consistency. Like we don't have thin skin around here. I mean, college football arguing, that's what we do. We have see, our sport is different than the other sports. Our sport is the shortest regular season and the longest off season. And the college football passion is what it is. And so therefore, the majority of the college football experience in a given year is arguing about games that are about to take place and arguing about games that just took place more so than it is actually watching the games. I mean, think about this. Y'all, when we get to September, you blink your eye and it's over, right? You know that feeling. We've all experienced that feeling before. That the life of a college football fan's year is mostly spent arguing. And so somebody's got to say something crazy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to argue about. And so from that standpoint, I ain't mad at Rece Davis, and I ain't mad at Kirk Herbstreit or whatever else. They're simply providing the fodder for the ongoing argument. I totally get all of that. But in the midst of arguing about this stuff, our only request is you must offer some logical consistency. And this to me is another example of kind of the inconsistent logic that's being thrown around here. And if you're a Georgia fan, this is honestly laughable. Just like some of the stuff from Feldman yesterday was sort of laughable. The idea that Ohio State would get more credit for keeping it close with Georgia than Georgia would get for actually winning the game, even though at one point in time, Georgia was told it couldn't win the shootout-style game. Then it does, and yet the goalpost gets moved to something else. You got the same thing going on here where Rece Davis says, Georgia fans, I know you hear me picking Michigan. I know you hear me talking about them being an unbeatable team. Here's the thing you need to know before you blow up my social media mentions, things like that. I want to see what you got going on at quarterback this year because you do have a new quarterback in place. You have to admit that's true. So I want to see what you got going on at quarterback. And if you just sort of fell out of the sky, you might think that sounds like a reasonable argument. But y'all, some of us weren't born 5 minutes ago. Some of us have been alive and on this planet for the last 2 years. And over the course of the last 2 years, this is what Georgia fans have heard. That Georgia could not win a national championship. It either couldn't win its first in 2021 or couldn't come back and repeat in 2022 because of the quarterback that it did have. Stetson Bennett was thought to be, in the eyes of a lot of these national types, a sort of deficient quarterback, future insurance salesman, things like that you may have heard said about him from time to time, that Stetson Bennett was sort of thought to be this inferior, insufficient quarterback that Georgia could never win a national championship with. Then Georgia wins 2 national championships, and now some of the same types of people who told you that Georgia couldn't win a championship because of Stetson Bennett now want to go on the Paul Finebaum show, and they want to say that Georgia can't win a national championship without Stetson Bennett. Like, you can argue whatever point you want to make. You can have fun with the ongoing discussion that we all have here, but we are begging you for some logical, sort of intellectual consistency, and a lot of these national types, they just simply don't provide that. over the course of years, college football has been whatever they said that it is. But they don't control the media narrative the way they used to anymore. And so, therefore, they're going to be having their feet held to the fire a little bit. Davis even kind of I guess, flinches in bracing for that because he knows that it's coming. And in this case, we believe rightly so. So, y'all, there it is. Michigan, totally, completely unbeatable here this year. If you're a Georgia fan, I don't know. Maybe you go hunting this fall. Maybe you plan a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation this fall. Get some, good savings on a great cruise destination. Maybe you just sort of take a break this fall and come back and try again in 2024, I guess, because Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, apparently, according to Rece Davis and National Writer this and whoever else, apparently they're just unbeatable. And pay no attention to the fact that they lost last year to a team that Georgia beat 65-7, and Georgia could have probably beaten Michigan 65-7 if it wanted to the year prior to that. Pay no attention to that. That's not relevant to this conversation right now for whatever reason. This year, maybe Michigan just completely unbeatable, we say with sarcasm fully entrenched. And that is Around the Dawghouse here today on DawgNation Daily. And it's served up and taken care of by our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And y'all, I've got some great news for you, because while the folks in Michigan may think they have an unbeatable football team, the folks down here in Georgia, they're not worried a bit about that. And if you are down here in Georgia right now, you've got an awesome new thing to try. And I'm being told here it's only available for a limited time. If you're watching on video, you see a nice look at it right there. How about peach-flavored Finish Long Drink? Fresh in time for this summer holiday weekend. You're hanging out by the pool. You're hanging out by the lake. You're with your friends arguing college football somewhere. How'd you like to pop the top and enjoy some delicious peach Finish Long Drink? The peach-flavored Finish Long Drink. Still got the same gin kick, but it's mixed with like the peach-flavored just deliciousness. That is going to be a great time. It's only available for a limited time. So if you go to thelongdrink.com, you can put in your zip code. You can figure out where you can pick some of this up. And you can be the talk of every single one of these 4th of July cookouts that you go to over the course of the next few days. When you show up with the peach-colored can, the peach-flavored Finish Long Drink, this is going to be a real game changer. It's out there and it's ready for a limited time. So make sure you check all of that out today. The Finish Long Drink bringing Around the Dawghouse to us here today. Now, I do want to be serious just for a second, because before we are done, there has been a topic on the minds of a lot of Georgia fans over the course of the last couple of days. We haven't really kind of gotten into this yet. More information available now. Probably seems appropriate that we do spend a minute or two talking about this. So we will do that before our show is done today. I don't want to try to finish on too serious of a note, just given the fact that everybody is in kind of a good mood moving into a holiday weekend. But also, there are certain due diligences that we have to do. So we'll probably do some of that here today before we close things out. We'll also kind of get into, before we're done today there as well, interesting war of words. We had some kind of bad news for Florida off the top of the show involving a current Georgia player. Also, a former SEC coach has had some interesting things to say about Florida and a few of those in-state rivals. We'll kind of get into some of that there. There is a proposed change coming to the NCAA transfer portal. That's probably worth paying attention to there as well. And Alabama fans maybe have reason to feel pretty good here today there as well. So we'll talk about a lot of that there coming up. But for now, on everything as it relates to Georgia football, moving towards a holiday weekend, let's get ready to do a Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here today. Okay, so I feel like we've done this a lot this week, but we're going to do this again today. We're going to give Jake a chance to get squared away and joined us. We're going to catch him on the phone here in just a little bit, and we'll do that. And, of course, we'll close out today's show live on video, because this is the part we'll always edit out for the podcast. If you're ever curious how the sausage is made around here, anytime we have any kind of like hiccup or something like that, we'll always edit this part out of the podcast. We'll try to keep the podcast sort of crisp and tightly edited, so we'll edit this part out. But live on video, I will let you know that we'll take your comments here to close out our day here on the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll do that here in just a couple of minutes' time. So prior to that, maybe we'll take a few comments here live today. That's something we've kind of done a few times already this week. Maybe we'll do that again today there as well. Cam Hasty says that peach version of the Finish Long Drink looks good. Yeah, Cam, I believe it will be good. I haven't tried any of that yet. I guess I was out of town when the announcement was first sort of made on this, so I haven't had a chance to enjoy that yet. But I am looking forward to getting a chance to try that some very, very soon. Let's see what else is going on here in the comments section right now. DT says, come on, Jeff is on vacation. That's why he's not on today. So the truth is Jeff is not on vacation. If you want to know the actual honest truth, although what I said before was true there as well, Mike was on vacation on Wednesday, so I moved Jeff up there to cover that. And then Terrence was at work yesterday, so we moved Connor to Thursday to kind of cover that. Jake Fromm is always a fun guest to have on a Friday, so we brought him on today. So we said this yesterday that some of the summer stuff is kind of moving the piece around the chessboard there a little bit. We haven't shied away from that, but it was important to get Jeff there on a Wednesday just because we had not been able to. We had not really been able to talk about some of the recruiting stuff because I'd been gone there for a minute. So it sounds like we're efforting to get Jake Fromm on the phone. We'll give him a chance to kind of catch up with us. I'll just take a few comments here for a moment, and then we'll sort of roll on after that. Randy Hall looking forward to the possibility of a KJ Bolden commit at some point in time. That would be certainly fun to see. That'd be really, really good. Let's go see what folks are doing over there on the Facebook page there as well. See how they are doing here just for a moment. On Facebook always a little slow to there we go. Nick Roundtree says, did you catch Sting? This is the wrestler hitting the splash off of a ladder through a table Wednesday night. Still the icon at 63. That is amazing. I did not see that. But I'm happy to know that Sting's still able to do that. It's one of those things that kind of fills you with a sense of comfort, even though it's 63, to be able to do that kind of stuff is pretty wild. So I'm glad to know that Sting's out there still doing all that. That's really, really good. Let us see what else. A lot of folks in the Facebook comment section having some fun. Mike Tampa Dog says, am I blocking some of my comments? I'm not blocking anybody's comments. Every now and then I will see a blocked comment. As I'm doing the show live, I will see a blocked comment. I don't know why. I think Facebook must do this because, I don't even know how to block a comment, first of all. And if somebody ever puts something objectionable, then somebody would step in there and block it. But somebody, it's probably happened before, but every now and then I'll be doing something live. I'll see a comment that just happened, and it does show up as blocked because I can sort of see when it's blocked, even I guess everybody else can't see it. So I don't know why that happens sometimes. Facebook is a very weird platform. It just is. Facebook for video is a very, very weird platform. Mike says it wasn't bad. Most of the comments that I see get blocked aren't bad at all. They're just normal. I see blocked comments all the time that are fairly normal. And as I said before, I'm not even physically capable of blocking them as I'm sitting here talking live. So that is probably a Facebook weirdness. There are a lot of weird things. Alex Lundeen asking about Aaron Murray. Yeah, we've had Aaron on the show before. I wouldn't mind doing that again. That'd be really fun. We've had him on the show a few times. Let's see what else is going on. Tim Tatum checking in. Good to see Tim here today there as well. Yeah, a lot of folks having some fun here in the Facebook comments section. Let me pop over to YouTube here for a moment there as well. And if you're just joining us, we're live on video. We're going to try to effort to get our buddy Jake Fromm here going in just a moment. And if not, we'll move on and we'll have Jake on some other time. But we are having a good time here on a Friday today. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron says, how long and how many national titles does Kirby have to win before we get the Bama bump or the Saban bump in recruiting? I don't know if that's a reference to Julian Saban, who now moves up to a 5-star status or not. We're going to talk about that there in a moment. We'll see. We'll kind of see about that. Matt Presley says, what are your thoughts in the front seven replacing several key players? So I still feel very confident. We talked about the front seven the other day from some writer, I think it was CBS writer, who said he still believes that the Georgia front seven is going to be the best in the country, and I think that's probably true there too. And I think some of this is probably propelled by some of those second-year guys who are kind of stepping up in a big way right now. For instance, I think a name that kind of gets lost in the shuffle and people forget about a little bit is someone like Marvin Jones Jr., who I really believe last year, at the end of last season, was just simply not playing fully healthy. And I think the Georgia coaches and the staff, I think they knew that Jones was likely heading for surgery at the end of the season. It didn't prevent him from being on the field at the end of last year, but it probably prevented him from playing at his absolute best. And so he missed spring practice. He's been recovering from that. And I think you see a version of him in year 2 that probably lives up to a lot of what that sort of 5-star billing was as a recruit. I think Mikael Williams is also one of those guys that right now just seems really destined to be a pretty big household name. Of all the sort of youngish players from Georgia, he is the one that seemingly has sort of cut through the clutter on a lot of this more so than anything else. You're seeing him mention a lot of the preseason All-SEC stuff, a lot of these early write-ups of breakout players, this, that, and the other. However the media chooses to frame it this time of year, you see Mikael Williams' name sort of show up pretty prominently in a lot of those types of discussions. So I think that that's a guy you can sort of expect to take a step towards stardom here this season. Do you miss a guy like Jalen Carter? Of course you do. But Georgia also replaced 3 first-round defensive linemen off the 2021 roster and didn't seem to skip a beat. I think they're set up to kind of do that again this year there as well. We talked about Jordan Hall, in kind of a fun fashion off the top of the show, but that's an example of a freshman that I think could really play. And, I'm not going to say a bad word about Barry Alexander, but do you think that Jordan Hall is every bit as capable of providing to Georgia's freshman this year what Alexander provided a year ago? I believe the answer to that question is probably yes. So I'm going to try to do 2 things at once in this. On the one hand, I'm not going to discount the significant challenge of remaining as stellar as Georgia has been along the defensive line. That's not an easy sort of rubber stamp thing to do year after year after year. It's not. But at the same time, I do feel pretty confident that Georgia is set up well to be able to do that. Kind of hearing from Trey Scott going back to January. Because remember, a lot of the national championship stuff, especially with Georgia playing a team like TCU, a lot of that media week was spent looking ahead to the next season because that's your one chance to interact with guys like Scott and people like that. And folks who talk to Trey will tell you that he was, I think, fairly confident what he had there along the defensive line here for this upcoming season. So expanded role for Zion Logue, veteran presence here this year. Warren Brinson kind of much the same way. I mean, I think when you look at why Bear Alexander transferred and went to USC, I'm sure NIL was a part of that. A chance to have a bigger spotlight may have been a part of that. But part of the reason why the spotlight would have been diminished at Georgia is because, listen, he was still going to share with Warren Brinson. He was still going to share time with Zion Logue and things like that. He was going to do all of that. And I think that rotation of defensive line remains pretty strong here for Georgia. So I feel very, very confident about that front 7 there overall. Let us see what else. Jay Buchanan says, I'm always repping the Dogs up here in Chattanooga. I talked to a fellow table of dog fans at a bar here in town, and they hadn't heard of your show, so I turned them on to it, spreading the love. Jay, can I tell you how much I appreciate that? Thank you very much. And, over the course of years, that's just one of the things that we've benefited from is word of mouth stuff like what Jay's doing right there. I do not take that for granted. I really, really appreciate that. And for those of you who are not aware, a lot of these sort of border towns, it's amazing how many Georgia fans there are. Obviously, Jacksonville, we talk about that a lot, but Chattanooga is an example of where you think a lot of Vols up there and things like that. Listen, there are a bunch of dog people up in Chattanooga for sure. And just down the road in Dalton, that's Georgia country. So way up there in, East Tennessee like that, a lot of dog people kind of fighting a good fight against all that orange up there. And so we appreciate you doing all that, Jay. I really, really do there as well. All right, let's see what else is going on. UGA boy for life Brunetti says, I think LS Who, as he calls them, is definitely on the rise, while Bama may be on the decline. I think that's the case there as well. Or at least I think the makings of that are true. I still think Alabama's going to be a formidable team. I was thinking about this yesterday a little bit, just kind of laying around and just kind of thinking that Alabama, I believe, is going to have a very good offensive line. And for as much as I've said that Georgia's going to benefit this year from having a great offensive line, there's a chance that Alabama also has a great offensive line there as well. This is me being, I guess, as objective and honest as I'm capable of being about the situation here, that Alabama, I think, could have a very good offensive line here this year. And I think they're going to probably run the ball pretty well. Freshman running backs, the biggest reason why. Obviously, Justice Haynes, Richard Young's also there as well. So you got a good stable of running backs. You've got a very good offensive line. And I think you're going to have, a pretty good defense in place there. Dallas Turner's still there. I think Dallas is an extraordinary player. I think Caleb Downs is going to be one of those guys that, you understand why there was so much talk about him as a recruit. I believe he has a chance to be a very good freshman player. So if you've got a really good defense and if you've got a really good offensive line and you've got a good stable of running backs, that's a pretty good team, right? I mean, Alabama is not going to be easy to beat this year with those things potentially going forward. That's the reason why they're, commonly sort of seen in the top 5 preseason. They're going to be favored to win most of the games they play here this year. But the one thing that Alabama I don't believe is going to have this season, what it has had in the past, I just don't think it's going to get the great quarterback play. I mean, last year had the number 1 overall pick playing quarterback for it. And that, almost anyone is a downgrade from that. The fact that it appears, in all likelihood, unless something really wild happens over the course of the summer, it appears that Jalen Milroe is the next starting quarterback for Alabama. That is just not the same level of quarterback play they've had. Now, when you factor in all the other things that I said, still a tough team to beat, but it's the situation there at quarterback which has caused, I think, a lot of people to kind of change their mind a little bit about Alabama as a true national championship contender. Now, Kirk Herbstreit says he hasn't changed his mind, but Kirk Herbstreit has also admitted he hasn't been paying attention to any of the preseason chatter thus far. I honestly don't know what he's waiting for, but when he does finally kind of sink his teeth into the stuff that we've been aware of over the course of the last several months, maybe he comes to the same conclusion of, a little bit different type of quarterback situation there with the Crimson Tide. It has been said coming out of Tuscaloosa, they're just sort of hoping to get their own version of Stetson Bennett, which is kind of funny and sort of laughable, I guess, in some respects. But good quarterback play paired with the other things Alabama has going for it, maybe that is enough. Maybe that is fine. But absent that, you may be looking at a situation where against a team like LSU, which, as Jaden Daniel said yesterday, does just have better quarterback play overall, understanding all of that, you may just be into a little bit of a tough situation there. So we shall see. All right, so if you're just joining us, we were going to try to get Jake Fromm on the show today, but it seems like Jake may be predisposed today, so we've been kind of tap dancing here a little bit. What we're going to do right now is we're going to get ready to roll on with the rest of our show. We'll talk about some of the Jamaal Jarrett stuff before we wrap up. We'll do the SEC through here, there as well. We'll try to cover that ground, and if something happens with Jake, we'll bring him on. We'll do that, and then we'll kind of rearrange all of this and put it in order for the podcast a little bit later on. I will take more of your comments to kind of wrap this up here today in just a little bit, as we always do on a Friday. But sorry for the little bit of a bait and switch there. That was not intentional, and we'll see if we can figure that out for later on. But for now, what do you say we roll on here on DawgNation Daily here today?
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Always a good chance for us here on a Friday to go around and look at everything happening around the SEC here right now. And as we do that, we call it Cruising Around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And that reminds me, as we wrap up this Friday, I had a chance to talk to one of our good friends yesterday who was already talking about the fact that he is looking forward to being on board for our DawgNation cruise coming up in April of 2024. In fact, we have that information we can put on the screen for the DawgNation cruise for this upcoming year. Or I should say it's next year, but it's the cruise for this upcoming year. Going to be on board Allure of the Seas. This is April 22nd through the 26th. This is going to be bigger and better than any DawgNation cruise has ever been before. And listen, I know I'm kind of a hype man, and I'm always saying, all kinds of stuff. But truly, when I tell you, the response we've already had to this upcoming DawgNation cruise for 2024 has already been amazing. And we've really just only now announced it and gotten it on the books and made it publicly available and known. And yet your response has already been amazing for this. Now, to be a part of the DawgNation cruise, I will tell you that space truly is limited. And part of that's just due to the fact that right now, Royal Caribbean is a very hot product. Their ships are sailing out on every single sailing. And the DawgNation cruise will be no different here. The staterooms we've been given, we really can't get more than that. I believe we have 200 staterooms available for the trip, and a lot of those have kind of already been filled. So your chance to be a part of this is right now. The website I've been telling you about is royaldogs.com. You can go there and you can find out about it. On board Allure of the Seas. The thing that makes Allure of the Seas fun is it's one of those Oasis class ships. This is the largest class of ships currently at sea. It is going to be an unbelievable experience. All of the fun special neighborhoods that the Oasis class ships have together. You're talking about like not just the Royal Promenade, but the Central Park and the boardwalk area. Stuff that when you're walking around, you're enjoying it. You almost say, I can't believe this is actually happening on board a cruise ship. I can't believe I'm actually at sea. All this is taking place. That's how cool Allure of the Seas is. But in addition to that, you've also got the special DawgNation events taking place there as well. And these DawgNation events, really unlike anything we've ever had before, more and more than we've ever had before. So all of that going down here very, very soon. So go to royaldogs.com to find out about the DawgNation cruise taking place April 22nd to the 26th, 2024, on board Allure of the Seas, leaving Port Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. More specially themed DawgNation events than ever before. royaldogs.com, the website to go to get all your information about that. All right, let's begin with this as we're cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. So one of the things we're watching here pretty closely is the sort of setup for the future of the SEC quarterbacks. And by the way, in a couple of minutes, Jake Fromm is going to be ready to join us. So we'll do that with Jake here coming up in just a little bit. So good job by our good friend Kaylee Manziel, hoping to get that squared away. But one of the things that we are looking to see in the future here is how the quarterback situations are set up around the SEC. We know what Georgia's kind of plans are right now. Now, we don't know what the exact pecking order is going to be, but we know what the plans are. In addition to what's already a very deep quarterback room, you've also got the arrival very soon of the five-star quarterback Dylan Raiola. Dylan's name's been in the news as of late just because of the fact that he's going to Beaufort High School and things like that. Well, he's also a part of that future story for the Georgia quarterback situation in some form, somehow. And around the rest of the SEC, they're also trying to grab hold of their future quarterbacks there too. And one of those guys is Julian Sayin. That's the Alabama quarterback commit. At one point in time, prior to Raiola kind of becoming truly and officially kind of on the radar there for Georgia, at one point in time, Sayin was a name we kind of mentioned around the sort of Georgia recruiting circles for a little while. Ultimately, Georgia set its sights on Dylan Raiola. As a response to that, Julian Sayin went to Alabama, and Sayin went to the Elite 11 finals out in California a couple of weeks ago, and he won the MVP, performed very well there, we're led to believe, and because of that, his recruiting ranking has responded, as it should. As a recruit, when you get more eyeballs on you, more information about you, your recruiting ranking ought to reflect what people are seeing, and they've seen more of Julian Sayin now. He sort of moved into the five-star category, and honestly, I don't have much to say about that one way or another, is that you would expect Alabama to have five-star quarterbacks. And you would expect a guy like Sayin, who had already kind of had a pretty good reputation as a recruit, to perform well in situations like this. And he sort of steps up and he sort of bolsters his claim as being one of the top quarterbacks. I think it's important to note here, though, while Alabama is, once again, doing what it's done a lot, Georgia's also kind of entering into a conversation now at the quarterback position, a way that it really hasn't always done before. Georgia knows in the future it's going to be playing the likes of Alabama and Texas on the road in 2024, and who knows in 2025 in some form or fashion. The SEC schedule is about to get more rigorous, and the pathway to a national championship in the postseason is about to become a little tougher there too because of the expanded playoff. So Georgia now says, Alabama, you've been doing this for a while, going out and getting five-star type quarterbacks like Sayin or Bryce Young before that or whoever else. And now Georgia says, we plan on doing the same thing every year there as well. So when these teams match up in the future and when Georgia match up against the other top teams in college football, expect Georgia to have quarterback play on par with just about anything that anybody else has there as well, which should make these matchups pretty fun here in the future, Sayin moving up to five-star status. I'll also mention this. I saw where Gus Malzahn, who's the UCF coach now, was kind of complaining recently about the fact that he thinks in his state, the teams like Florida and Florida State, Miami, the traditional Power 5 teams, have gotten too much attention at the expense of a team like UCF, which, by the way, is now also in the Power 5 as well, in the Big 12 now. And I do think this kind of sets up pretty interesting. By the way, in 2024, we're going to see UCF and Florida playing during the regular season. And it's important to note, right there in Central Florida, UCF is in the Orlando area, right there in that sort of Central Florida region, access to players. Malzahn's a coach who's won the SEC before. Malzahn really has had more success than, for his career than Norvell or Mario Cristobal down in Miami, Billy Napier there at Florida. Gus Malzahn is more of a veteran presence. He is more of a seasoned, experienced, successful head coach. And the presence of UCF, at least now technically speaking, in the Power 5, I think that could make for some interesting challenges down there in Florida. And Malzahn says he wants more attention for his Knights team. Well, the chance to beat some of these Florida teams head-to-head, including Florida next year, the chance to have more comparative success as they move into the Big 12, I think the presence of UCF and Malzahn in particular at UCF, I do think that could be a little bit of an issue for some of these teams moving forward. And so Gus Malzahn may get a chance to finally earn some of that attention on the UCF program that he says that he wants. I was going to do something on the transfer portal and the window potentially being changed. It's a little bit of a procedural issue. We may save that and do that one day next week. Instead, let me for now get ready to go ahead and close up our SEC through, and we'll get ready to bring on Jake Fromm onto the program here today. Of course, Jake Fromm participating with us as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. We'll look forward to doing that, having him as a part of our show today. We've got that squared away, got that ready to go. And we'll talk to a lot of the stuff that's been going on with Jake Fromm here. In particular, I want to ask him a little bit about Dylan Raiola, what it means for a guy like Dylan to be at Buford, facing the kind of intense Georgia high school football competition that Jake Fromm, faced when he was at Houston County, how much that benefits him and, some things like that. We'll also talk about the value of the offensive line that the current Georgia quarterback, Carson Beck, the rest of this Georgia offensive situation is going to kind of have going for it. We'll talk about a lot of that on the program today. In fact, let's go ahead and get ready to do that right now as the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm ready to join us here today on our Kroger Fresh Take here on DawgNation Daily. Jake, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you being with us and hope you're getting ready for a fun 4th of July weekend. How you doing today?
Hey, Brandon, what's going on? Thank you for having me. So excited for the 4th, getting all the barbecue and stuff ready to go this weekend. Got a little training session in this morning, man, and glad to be here. I'm
glad to have you here there, too. And I want to go back in time here for a moment because I remember that 4th of July years ago when we all found out that you'd had I guess it was the water skiing injury or whatever else that was, and it must be weird when you're that young, because at that time you were obviously still very young, and your actions just get so much attention. And I mean, how I guess nervous would you have been having to let Kirby Smart or your other coaches know, hey, I got hurt, doing this water skiing thing or whatever else, and knowing there's going to be this sort of firestorm of attention that kind of comes your way because of that. All you are is just out having a good time. You're not doing anything you're not supposed to be doing. You're just out having fun, and it's just sort of a weird accident that takes place. I guess you injured your hand. I guess that was. How weird was that to know that, oh gosh, not only am I hurt here, but this is also going to be a big thing for the next few days. Was that weird for you?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of your heart sinks a little bit. Because as innocent as it is, you're just out having a good time. And I mean, believe it or not, I mean, I'm in the boat. I'm not out wake surfing. I'm not out wakeboarding. I'm not tubing. I'm the responsible one in the boat, just hanging out, enjoying the fellowship with everybody. And a rope comes back to the boat and kind of tries to take everybody out. I put my hand up to block, and boom, it hits my hand. So breaks the kind of the pinky hand. Finger in my hand, man, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely was a little bit scared, but it all kind of being able to work out. Made this awesome brace that Mr. Ron got made up for me out of carbon fiber, and I was able to practice play and help the team out. So, yeah, but yeah, definitely a little scary moment there in the summer in July 4th, my sophomore season. Yeah,
you didn't miss any time, right? You even were full go by the time practice. Memories fade after these years, but you didn't miss any time from that, did you?
Yeah, there was no time missed, which was crazy, kind of that was able to happen. So, but man, just kind of it was a very interesting summer. But man, thank the Lord that I was able to still compete and do the things I needed to do.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where, I think even those of us who are not football players, we have a little bit of an understanding of this, is when you enter your college career, you know that you've only got a brief window to take advantage of it, right? It's you want to be on the field, you want to play, and you realize that something weird could happen. It could take me away from that. I could lose some time through really no fault of my own, no actions like that. I mean, that's got to keep all these players a little bit nervous from time to time of, I've only got so long to enjoy this kind of, prime of my young athletic career. And gosh, something weird could happen out of nowhere that just sort of puts all that into jeopardy.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the very next day after the x-rays, I'm in kind of a brace cast. I got a few receivers together, got somebody to snap for me, just to make sure, man, I could still throw the football and do the things that I needed to do because, that was a big summer for me. Justin was here. And man, I needed to go out and prove that I was a starter and take that role on. So I was not necessarily the best time in the world to have a hiccup or an injury, but we had it and we fought through it.
Well, listen, I'm glad to know all of that. And I said at the time, listen, I got no problem with my guys being out there, enjoying some time during the 4th of July. I think that's what you should be doing. I'd rather y'all be doing that than, in the house playing video games, something like that. At least you're out, with people and getting some outdoor time and some things like that. I'll take that over the alternative any day of the week.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. Get out with the boys, get out with your family. Enjoy it. Spend a little time in God's creation. Nothing better than that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I don't know how much you've had a chance to pay attention to this, but we had some news, I guess it was last week, that future Georgia quarterback Dylan Raiola leaving Arizona, coming to Buford, powerhouse program obviously in the state, playing his senior year in Georgia before going to UGA at the end of the calendar year. What did you make of the fact that Raiola is now going to be a whole lot closer to campus as he gets ready to play his senior season?
Yeah, that's to me a very big deal. Shows the commitment from his side, his point of view of things, and from his family's perspective. They're coming here to, they mean business. They're putting their money where their mouth is, moving their family across the country, and looks like he wants to compete at a very high level. To me, I don't think there's a higher level you can't compete at the high school football level than in Georgia, playing against the programs that we have. So. I think that's a very big deal, and then being right up the road. 45 minutes to an hour away from the university. I think he's going to be spending a lot of time here.
Yeah, because I think we saw this, in the pandemic year, where a lot of guys lost their senior season of high school football, and so they go into college. And some of those guys were here at Georgia, and other guys were going other places. So they go into their beginning of their college career, and I think they missed out on a really important building block of their athletic development. Jake, and once again, I'm not a player, you are, so you can, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong here, but to me, I feel like you learn a lot about yourself when you're being really pushed. And listen, I don't care if you are the number one player in the country, which Dylan Raiola obviously is. You play in 7A football here in Georgia, you're going to get pushed. You're going to face some real 100%. Significant challenges. And I just think you learn something about yourself when you face that. Those of us who try to talk about this stuff for a living, I think we get better evaluations of players when we see them battling other good players. And I'll tell you this right now, Jake, the fact that Dylan wants that for himself, the fact that he could have sat out there in Arizona and basically sort of twiddled his thumbs and just bided his time before arriving at Georgia, the fact that he chose a harder path, to me, I see that as a very good thing. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think it's a very good sign of what he's made of. I think you find a lot about yourself, like you were saying, when you were pushed, when you're pressed, you really find out kind of what you're made of, what comes out of you when you're really put in these uncomfortable situations. And he's just voluntarily signing up for that. Going to go play against a really competitive football team in Buford itself, but then also with who they play in the state of Georgia. So I think that's a great sign, kind of what his kind of competitive spirit is made of, and I think he'll end up better for it, in my opinion.
We learned a little earlier this week that apparently Jim Harbaugh, the Michigan coach, is going to have a period at practice they're calling the Beat Georgia period, and I guess this is kind of a motivational thing of they want to be the national champions. Georgia obviously is, and so they're making no bones about the fact that being as good as Georgia, better than Georgia, is their stated goal, despite the fact they don't play Georgia in the regular season here. I guess I'm curious, as a guy who's been through a lot of practices, one of the things it seems like Kirby Smart goes out of his way to say a lot of times is that Georgia doesn't think a lot about other opponents during practice. Beginning of the season, he's always really slow, seemingly to want to transition to actual game week preparations. And, he's always talking about we're working on ourselves. He seems to say that a lot. How much do you think the idea of thinking about another team other than your own during practice, how much room for that do you think there is during a practice schedule, whether it be 1 week or 1 year or whatever else? What do you think about Michigan kind of talking about Georgia during its practices, we're led to believe, on a fairly regular basis?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth on this one because I think kind of in the coach's realm, what they'll do is they'll sneak in some team periods when you're going against scout looks of other opponents maybe later on down the road. But then, for a coach to kind of come out and say, hey, we're going to have a period of beating Georgia, who's not even on the schedule, I think is, in my opinion, kind of a red flag. You're kind of worried about the wrong things. In my opinion, during this time of the season, this time of the year. I think you should be focused on yourself. How can you make yourself better and competing against, offense versus defense and defense versus offense. So that's just my opinion. I think if you just kind of worry about yourself and compete within yourself, I think it'll end up benefiting you a little bit better later down the road.
I know his time as a coach sort of started as your time as a recruit was kind of coming to an end. But did you ever meet Jim Harbaugh? He seems like a very different kind of character as a football coach to me.
Yeah. Did meet him one time, kind of quick in passing. But he's won a lot of football games as a head coach and had a lot of success. So I guess he's doing some things right for sure.
It's our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here on DawgNation Daily. As I told you before, get stocked up for everything you need for a great, fun weekend. You're out on the boat, you're at the lake, you're playing golf, whatever you got going on, cookouts, things like that, food on the grill, beverages in the cooler, all of that there at your local Kroger, Kroger.com. You can download digital coupons. You can start saving right away and taking advantage of all the great stuff that Kroger is helping you do to get stocked up for a big, fun summer weekend. Jake, one more topic I kind of want to address with you for a minute before we wrap up here today. So as I look at Georgia for the upcoming season, one of the things that I see in plays is what I think can be a stellar offensive line once again. Frankly, probably the best offensive line in the country here once again for this upcoming year there as well. I think underrated in 2021 and 2022 was the way in which the Georgia offensive line performed. I don't know that Georgia wins these national championships if not for an offensive line that was as successful as what Georgia's has been. I also think back to your career there as well when, as you kind of stepped in as the Georgia quarterback, this is also a time in which the Georgia offensive line was really kind of stepping up in a big way there as well. A lot of folks forget, the Georgia offensive line play in 2016 before you got here had not probably been, great. And yet very early in the 2017 season, it was obvious that Andrew Thomas stepping in as a starter and, Isaiah Wynn taking the next step in his career, that this was going to be a very good Georgia offensive line. And I think the entire time you were here, you played against, I should say you played behind really good offensive lines. Like, how quickly as a player did you realize as you're kind of, stepping into the role of quarterback of, Kirby, Sam Pittman, they've done a really good job of putting this offensive line in front of me. And how much of a comfort and a security was that for you, knowing that this program was as committed to those big, beefy bodies there on the offensive line as it was?
Yeah, to me, I don't know if the normal, football viewer, fan really understands how much a team lives and dies by how the big men play in that football game. If you got really good big men, man, you can win some football games, especially on the offensive line, especially on the defensive line. If those guys want to take over a football game, they can absolutely suffocate the other team in whatever area they're trying to beat you in. As an offensive line, if you got a unit that can pass protect for you and can physically dominate the defensive line as far as moving them in the run game, you can completely take over a football game and beat the other team's just will to want to win. And I think the offensive line unit that Coach Smart has kind of built here is really impressive. The guys they have here, big, giant guys, tenacious guys, and when you see a offensive line unit kind of rotating 2-3 different guys in, depending on series, that's when you know they have a really good unit. And, man, they're still trying to figure out who the dudes are because they got so many good dudes on their roster. So I think that's a one hidden gem that they've really done a great job here of building as the offensive line unit. I got to play behind some great guys as well. Andrew, Solly, Lamont, Isaiah Wynn, Ben Cleveland. I played behind some really, really good football players, and they just continue to recruit guys and build them, and we're still having some great guys come out into the league for sure.
Well, I'll follow up before we let you go here, because I don't think a lot of times people fully appreciate how rare that situation is becoming in college football. Maybe a few years ago, all the best teams had 2 and 3 deep along the offensive line. Maybe that's the case, but if you look around in comparison to some top contenders right now in college football, I've mentioned Ohio State before as an example of this. There are a lot of these teams that think they can win the national championship, but they're really questioning their offensive line depth. Georgia got situated much yet, and yet we think he can be a very good player the moment he gets on the field. Georgia may have 2 very capable backups at offensive tackle this year, and in previous years, Marius Mims, who technically was kind of a backup a year ago, and Broderick Jones, who was sort of a backup the year before that, their insertion into a starting lineup after injury became a really important part of how Georgia actually won the national championship. The level of OL depth that Georgia has right now is pretty rare, even among national championship contenders at the moment.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. When you're able to have that depth for the longevity of a season, and I mean who knows? I mean one of these players just might need a few reps, a few opportunities to go into a game, and they might blossom into a first-round draft pick and an All-American. So you just have no idea what you have on your hands. You just know that, man, you recruit some really, really good football players, some good young men, some guys who want to do the best for your football team, and then you put them into your program that's proven, building guys up and getting the best out of them. And you can have a really dangerous football team and offensive line unit on your hands.
All right, Jake, thank you so much for being here as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take today. We do hope you enjoy your 4th of July weekend here coming up, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you here on DawgNation Daily again very soon there as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brandon. Have a good weekend.
You too, sir. Really good stuff there. Jake Fromm, former Georgia quarterback. Always a really fun conversation, and we're glad that all of you are with us there for that. And we've tried to have some fun today, but as we close out the show here coming up in a moment, I do want to get serious just for a moment and address something that's kind of been out there for the last couple of days. The honest truth is I'm probably not going to address this to the same degree that some of you wish that I would, but I do want to talk about this a little bit right now. There were reports earlier this week that Jamaal Jarrett was facing a very serious allegation against him at one point in time, going back to his official visit to Georgia back when he was just 16 years old. And, listen, we take stuff like that very seriously, and I think there's some questions that have been asked about what should have been done to Jarrett because of that. And I think we've seen some additional information come out that maybe helps people like me kind of have I guess, more full picture about all of this. And, while Jarrett was facing an accusation of sexual assault, ultimately charges were not brought against him on that. And the best that I can tell, and listen, I don't do the crime beat, y'all. That's not what I do for a living. But the best that I can tell, based on the information that's out there, it seems like the police made the right decision on that. And in response to that, Georgia, who, had to kind of evaluate the situation related to Jarrett and the fact that he was, facing these questions by law enforcement based on an accusation made against him. I don't have any reason to believe that Georgia made a wrong decision on any of that either. When somebody like me says something like that, there are some people who are going to want to say, oh, well, BA, you're just saying that because you're a Georgia fan. You just, you're willing to forgive whatever because you want Georgia to win. And in this particular case, or as far as that particular statement goes, I want to take a moment to defend not just Georgia fans, but I really feel like college football fans in general, because I think that sometimes there are people, and sometimes it's media types, sometimes this is just, other sports fans, whatever else, that kind of want to paint with a really broad brush on certain things like this. And there are some people who sort of assume that, well, if you're a Georgia football fan, you're willing to excuse whatever from your team because you just want them to win. And then some Georgia fans might say that about Alabama fans, and they might say that about Tennessee fans. Like, y'all are alive and exist on the internet. You see the way in which this kind of stuff gets thrown back and forth to various fan bases, all the time. But I will say of Georgia fans and, frankly, of other SEC fans, because over the course of my time, doing this show, not only do I interact with tens upon tens of thousands of Georgia fans, but I interact with a good number of fans of other schools there as well. And to be completely frank and completely honest, I have never met a single fan who would be willing to excuse bad behavior just so his team could win a football game. I've never seen that before. When it comes to this particular situation involving Georgia football in particular, the people who congregate around Georgia football to listen or watch a show like this, they either come here because this is their university. It's the University of Georgia. For some people, the word university really means something. It's my university. I want to be proud of my alma mater. For other folks, it's the word Georgia that means something. This is the football team of my home state, and I want to feel good about the sort of fan relationship I have with that. Well, neither of those two pillars of fans that I've experienced anyway, and as I said before, I've interacted with tens upon tens of thousands of you over the course of our years of doing this. I've never met a single fan who was like, I don't care what these guys do, I just want them to go out and win football games. I would certainly put myself in that category there as well. I am not in the business of excusing anyone's bad behavior here, but while the accusation against Jarrett is very serious, the best that I can tell, based on the information that's out there, I don't see any reason to believe that the law enforcement or the Georgia football team acted improperly in all of this. And I think it's important to note here. And listen, a lot of this stuff is very, very complicated, and different people sort of, you want to move into kind of the political part of all this discussion. Different people have different opinions on some of this kind of stuff. I certainly acknowledge that, and for the most part, we steer clear of a lot of that kind of stuff. Part of the reason why we've been as successful as we are, we're pretty disciplined about what we choose to talk about. And in this particular case, I guess what I feel comfortable saying is an allegation is not the same thing as a condemnation. And I think that's just really, really important to point out here, whether it be Jarrett or somebody else in the future or somebody else in the past or whatever else. And I think that's the way we would hope we were all treated, or those that we love would be treated, if they were in a similar situation. Look at the facts, look at the evidence, make the best possible decision you can. In this particular case, the best that I can tell is that's sort of what's been done here. That's sort of the way that's gone down there. And look, a lot of people are listening or watching right now, and they want to hear more about whatever else. And look, what I feel comfortable saying is what I have said right there. It is a tough situation. It's not the kind of thing we enjoy talking about, especially on a weekend like this. We're trying to have some fun, and obviously we've tried to do that for most of the show here today. But it's a big enough story that you probably can't ignore that. And so, from that standpoint, that's just kind of the way that plays out. A lot of Georgia fans have weighed in, and I guess I'll take the time to do the same right there. So on a completely different note, to wrap up here today, what I love about our audience is that even in the midst of me trying to tell you about something brand new, some of you are like, "B, I already knew that. I knew that before you did," because I told you today, I introduced to you today the idea of the Finnish long drink peach flavored beverage that's going to be such a hot thing here this weekend. Well, guess what? Some of y'all already knew this there as well. In fact, let me show you this as part of our Golden Shoe today. So Shane Holiday shares this. He says, "Did you have anything to do with this? Hashtag go for 3 and 23. First of all, that always gets you moved right to the front of the line. Go for 3 and 23. A nice close-up of the peach can there. So I introduced the peach long drink to you today. Shane on Twitter has already enjoyed it. And he's already spreading the good word about all of that. So, Shane, you enjoy that. You have a good time. And we'll be drinking plenty of that as we go for 3 and 23 here this season. By the way, lousy stinking Gators, as Jordan Hall said to begin the show today, they don't have a whole lot going for them right now. And 120 days from right now, it gets even worse. Y'all have a great weekend. Don't forget, we're back here on Monday, so y'all join us, be a part of that, and we'll see you then. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Talk to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. And what a kind of a wild show that was, sort of shifting Jake Fromm around a little bit, and then trying to cover a lot of bases here over the course of our time together. And that is all of that. So we had a good time doing that. We're now glad to have all of you here, too. We'll take a few of your comments, and then we'll get ready to roll out of here after that. We did some comments earlier, but some of y'all don't like it when we shortchange the comments at the end. So we'll take that pretty seriously here and get some of your comments here before we wrap up on a Friday. Hemingway, going back to the topic we mentioned a moment ago about innocent until proven guilty, and I do believe that's really important. I do believe the idea of due process is really important. And then when it comes to, and this is where, look, just because I don't talk about a lot of things doesn't mean I don't have opinions about a lot of things, but around here, I'm not giving away opinions for free. They pay me to give Georgia football opinions, and my opinions on other things, I ain't giving them away for free. Over the course of the last decade or so, the idea of how much due process ought to be appropriate for an on-campus accusation of sexual assault, different people have had different opinions about that over the course of the last decade. And if you follow the news and things like that, you may be aware of that. That's the kind of sort of political type realm that we just don't really get into around here. But I am comfortable telling you I'm in favor of due process in all things at all times. And in this particular case, I think that's exactly what kind of worked out here. Bob Zamblin, a good buddy of ours. Glad to see Bob here. Got a chance to hang out with Bob a little bit yesterday, too. So that was really nice and be able to do. Let's see what else. Brooksy says that that Jake Fromm is using they to talk about Georgia more instead of we. I don't think that's fair to say, though, Brooksy. I think you're doing that in kind of good fun. But I don't think that's fair as much because, like, Jake is, like, first of all, Jake is still around that Georgia program a pretty good bit, but he's also a good bit older than some of these guys are now. He sort of sees this as sort of the next generation of Georgia player. This is sort of like the thing that, and we've done this a little bit, where sometimes Kirby Smart will use we to talk about the defense and them to talk about the offense. He sort of others the Georgia offense, and we've sort of joked about that before. But ultimately, we try not to get too pronoun serious around here. Oh, yeah, DT reminded us about Jake Fromm's grandma baking those cookies. Was it cookies or cakes or pies or something? I forgot about that. Let's see what else. Blah, 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 blah. Cam Hasty says, I miss the days back when Jake Fromm having a water skiing accident was the worst thing to happen during an off season. I kind of know what you mean there on that. Bob Zamblin says he hopes that Jake Fromm can get some playing time this year with the Commanders. Yeah, I do there as well. You know, I kind of watched the waiver wire on Washington, kind of how they handle their quarterback situation, because I do think that Jake could be in a pretty good spot there. And I'll tell you this, because, you know, Jake and I talk, you know, some, you know, off the air during the week, just planning the show and things like that. He's working hard. I mean, he's been heavily involved in Commanders OTA stuff, doing some of his own personal training and personal work. Like, Jake has given this his best shot, and I do. And it's one of the cool things that you get a chance to do in a job like this. It's not just guys like Jake, but some of the, like, most of the NFL is not first-round draft picks, right? And I guess a lot of professional sports that way as well. Like, did you follow the NBA Finals? Like, what's the thing about the percentage of, like, Miami Heat players that were undrafted or something like that? Now, the NBA's only got 2 rounds in the draft. But, like, we think about first-round draft picks a lot, and we think about, like, Bryce Young a lot, and all these guys that are kind of like that sort of first-round draft pick status. But that is not what most of the NFL is. Most of the NFL is, I'm going to fight. I'm going to go on my own dime to try out. I'm going to give it my best shot. It's almost like most of the NBA, I should say, most of the NFL actually kind of functions a little bit like what like a PGA Tour golfer might function like, where it's like, I'm going to go to the Monday qualifier, I'm going to try to play well there, get in the tournament, and try to win enough money to pay my way home. Like, you know, there is just a lot of professional sports is not the sort of coddled, you know, golden, you know, gilded life that this very small percentage of professional athletes have. A lot of this is just sort of fighting for your shot. And we see that from a lot of Georgia players there as well. You know, for every Jalen Carter who's a top 10 pick, there's a Kearis Jackson trying to make the roster as a non-drafted free agent. And I do think a lot of that stuff is not just fascinating. A lot of it's really inspiring because, and this is the part of like Hard Knocks that I like. I like the part where they focus in on the guy trying to make the club as like the non-drafted guy, trying to make a name for himself. I like that part of football. I really, really do. There's a reason that football is so popular that has to do with more than just entertainment, things like that. Like football has sort of stood the test of time because of the life lessons that it demonstrates. And when you see the level of perseverance that the kind of, you know, guys at the non-first round glamour part of the NFL, when you see the work they put in just to be on the team, like that's inspiring, and I think we get a good glimpse of that with a lot of these former Georgia guys, which I really enjoy. Low Country Dog says he's still shocked that Aaron Murray didn't have more than an NFL career. It's just sort of hard to know, right? I mean, it is a very inexact science. It really is. It really is. How about this from Curtis Jackson? Curtis is a man after my own heart. He says, I love my country, I love my dogs, and I love to finish long drink. Curtis, you're my president. If that's your platform, you're my president. Our great country, the dogs, and some Finnish long drink. That is, you may be my president. Ridgewfly says, here's a change of topics. ESPN dropped Dylan Raiola as the number 1 recruit, replaced him with Ellis Robinson. First of all, we may talk about this at some point in time. I think Connor's going to write about this. Ellis showed out at that 7-on-7 deal the other day. So he's good. He's really good. I am kind of curious to see if Dylan can hold on to the number 1 recruit ranking through the entirety of the cycle. We don't really care about the ESPN recruiting rankings as much. ESPN sort of like back when you're in high school, your friend let you copy their homework, but they said, hey, just don't make it too obvious. That's what ESPN's recruiting rankings are. They are a copy of On3 or 24/7, but they change just enough to not make it too obvious. That's all ESPN's recruiting rankings really are. So we don't take them all that seriously. But one of the worst things you can be, and listen, I have a lot of friends who work for these recruiting places. I have great respect for all of them. But one of the worst things you can be from a recruiting rankings standpoint is a committed player. Committed players don't often see their recruiting ranking, exactly, hold fresh. So we'll see if a committed Dylan Raiola can stay at the number one. Trevor Maffetone said that Curtis is my drunk long drink president. Listen, what you do in the White House is your own business. Let's see what else. G. Grace Bama Boy says Ellis Robinson might be the best high school corner I've seen since Pat Surtain. He's ready right now. So there you go. G. Grace throwing the Ellis's way. What I like from the defensive backs is I like that ability and that willingness to be physical at the line of scrimmage. And that's some of the video stuff that you saw from Ellis coming off of the other day Jeremiah Smith, who I think is very good. I mean, much like G. Grace is going to be generous to a non-Bama guy there in Ellis, I'll be generous to Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith's not coming to Georgia. I think he's very, very good. And Ellis is really bumping him, man. And that's what I want to see. I want to see that physicality line of scrimmage. And Ellis seems to really have that. Because it seems like, and I'm not a coach or anything like that, but it seems like that ability to kind of like pop them at the line, but then also run with them once they kind of get their the bearings about them again. It just seems like that's kind of a rare trait, and I don't know. Ellis seems to have that. So I think he's very good. And, Jeff has kind of touted him for a while. Jerry Dog Fan says, what exactly is the Learfield Directors Cup? And that is basically it used to be called the Sears Cup, I think, years ago. It's basically just sort of the combined points you earn for all of the other sports. Teams like Stanford typically win it. All the sports sort of combine. And they do all of that. Let's see what else. Trevor Maffetone, the idea of how Kirby Smart has handled some of the allegation stuff. I mean, listen, this is no easy job. But on this topic, we're pretty consistent. Because, like, the one thing that I think you would hear us say over the years is that we think criminal investigations, for the most part, are a law enforcement issue. And honestly, when the entire world was sort of jumping all over like Brandon Miller at Alabama, you'll remember we didn't do that around here. And it was easy fodder, and it's whatever else. We didn't do a ton of that around here. We really didn't, because for the most part, we think criminal investigations are left in the hands of law enforcement. And you've seen Kirby take different tacks with different players over the years. And my assumption is that must have been fact dependent. For instance, in the case of Adam Anderson, there were actual charges that came against him, where in the case of someone like Jamaal Jarrett, that just didn't happen. Law enforcement saw no need to press the charges there on that. And that's just kind of how that goes, is that you are forced to make some tough decisions, but following the lead of the criminal investigators seems to be the best tact on all of that. And, by the way, if any of us were sort of facing a similar situation, I think we'd probably hope for kind of a similar type deal. Let's see what else. And let me go to Facebook for a moment. Rhodey Williams sounds like he's having a good time right now. You love to see that. Joseph Kennedy there as well. A lot of folks got big plans here this weekend. You love to see that. Let's see what else is going on. Alan Arkin has passed away. That's sad. Very good actor. Very good actor is Alan Arkin. Very, very sad. Very good actor. Joe Zucchini says they want Kirby to kick off all the players off the team that got in trouble with speeding, so their team has a chance to win a championship. They think it's that simple. And we said this at the time when there were a couple of players recently who were kind of involved in some sort of those like speeding type things, suspicion of DUI, something like that. But the one thing I'm not going to do if I'm a coach, we said, and I'll be very clear about this, I am not going to judge someone's actions on the basis of someone else's action. In other words, player X gets a speeding ticket, but because player Y and Z got speeding tickets before that, therefore I'm going to treat player X more harshly because I'm trying to send a message. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat every player who may run afoul of whatever, who may have an allegation against him, whatever else. I'm going to treat every player independent and try to make the decision on the basis of those allegations. And guess what? If I was player X's parents and I felt like my player got treated more harshly because of something that player Y did and the sort of, public relations part of all of that, you better believe I'm going to lawyer up. And I would advise anybody else to consider doing the same thing there as well, is that public relations, how something is perceived to be, does not supersede civil rights. And this is still kind of a civil rights issue, right? It's like you have rights when you are facing an allegation. You have rights in terms of certain things. And, the idea that public relations is so important that you have to sort of trample on at least potentially trample on a player's civil rights, I just simply don't agree with that. I simply don't. And I would advise not just Georgia to operate that way. I'd advise Tennessee, Alabama, Florida to operate that way. Is that the civil rights of your players are more important than whatever the public perception might be if you're truly doing the right thing. Let us see what else. And I realize so many of y'all want me to say so much more than what I'm saying right now. But I'm saying what I'm saying, and we're leaving it at that. Let us see what else. Oh, how about this from Bill Sanders? That Michael Soroka going to start tonight's game for the Braves. So when Soroka went back down, some of y'all help me out with this because I am not probably the down on the farm expert here. When Soroka went back down, he started pitching much better, right? And by the way, what's his name they brought up for the spot start the other day? He did pretty well too. Braves, their offense is like the 99 Rams of Major League Baseball. Pitching, if you're thinking about actually winning the World Series, you got to make sure you kind of, feel okay about what you're doing on the mound. And some of that's injury related, of course. Getting guys like Max Fried back. But Soroka's potential return could be a pretty big deal. And it seems like he's done a little bit better after his kind of like brief cup of coffee coming back up and then going back down again. It seems like he's done a little bit better since then. Let's see what else. William Camacho says he's not going to be able to be here on Monday. Let me see if I can get the rest of his comment. Oh yeah, so he said I'm not going to be going through a colonoscopy on Monday. That is one of those things you just got to do, and it sounds like you're doing that. So best of luck on all that. We'll look forward to seeing you back here very, very soon, William. We appreciate you sharing that with us, and we'll miss you, but we'll be glad to have you back here very, very soon. All right, let's see what else. A couple more comments here. Over here on the YouTube side of things. Let's see what else. Georgia on tap on the subject of Daniel Calhoun. A little bit of a difference of opinion there. I can tell you this, that everything I've been led to believe, the Georgia coaches, the opinion that probably mattered the most, they think that Calhoun is definitely an impressive player. And they've had to fight and battle and, work hard for that potential commitment. They hope to be able to get it. And Calhoun could be one of these, along with Michael Ewing today. Are we going with Ewing? Do y'all feel confident that's how you say it, Ewing? Georgia could have 4 offensive line commitments the next few days. And so I certainly think that the Georgia coaches feel very, very good about Calhoun. Let's see what else. Yeah, Paul Moon on this on the subject there. It seems like Georgia does have a few offensive linemen on the way. Michael Porter says, "Do I see a three-peat?" Yeah, we predicted this last week, or maybe it was actually prior to that. I guess that would have been going back to early June. I do believe that Georgia will win the national championship again. And like the one thing that I tried to convey here, of course, the last few months is that I do think over the course of 15 games beginning in September, something very weird is likely to happen. The example I keep citing, and I'm sure we'll do more of this as we get towards SEC Media Days. In 2013, Alabama had won 2 straight national championships. They were almost certainly the odds-on favorite to win their next national championship. They were certainly the odds-on favorite to win the SEC at the very, very least. I'm actually looking forward to going back and looking and seeing what Media Days preseason predictions looked like in 2013. This is an Alabama team that was a juggernaut. And out of nowhere, a first-year coach who had been in high school 5 minutes ago, Gus Malzahn, a quarterback who really should have been playing defensive back. They won the SEC that year. They beat Alabama. And it sort of came unforeseen out of nowhere. I am not saying the same thing is going to happen to Georgia. The best that I can tell, it's not. But you better be on guard for anything. Even last year, an example of that. Yeah, I was in Columbia, Missouri. And it's that weird progression your mind goes through of you travel all the way out there and then you realize, oh, this is going to be one of those games which Georgia's not really trying and it's kind of boring. And then, when I say they're not really trying, you know what I mean. I'm speaking casually. And then you realize, is Georgia going to lose? And everything just changes. Boom, just like that. Where like you go from being disappointed that Georgia's not putting on a show and just totally like annihilating its competition. You go from feeling that way to just hoping that Georgia wins, just hoping they can hold on and win. And thankfully they did. So that just goes to show you a year ago that wild, crazy things can happen. And we got to be on guard for anything wild and crazy happening. And you got to hope, if you're a Georgia fan, that what Georgia does in that moment is what it did a year ago, is take what could be some really tough circumstances and find a way to kind of persevere through that. When Alabama kind of found themselves in a weird situation in 2013, Auburn got the best of them. Y'all know they're going to, if they can find a way to keep Georgia out of the playoff, they will. If you told me, hey, I've seen the future and Georgia didn't win the national championship, and you asked me to guess how come they didn't, my prediction would be not that they lost to somebody in the playoff. My prediction would be that somehow, some way, they found a way to keep Georgia out of the playoff. That Georgia's stumbling block towards winning a national championship is not someone they'll face in the playoff. It's the idea that over the course of a long 12-game season, somebody gets them, and that becomes an excuse to keep them out of the playoff. That's what you got to play defense against, y'all. That's what you got to play defense against. John Paul Williams says, how about a DawgNation invasion of the Republic of Texas for the Dogs matchup with the Longhorns? John, you better know we're already talking about that and planning for that, and that could be a lot of fun. Johnny Surf Dog says that he thinks that Oklahoma could be in a heap of trouble joining the SEC without a defense. Johnny, let's see what happens this year. Let's give Brent Venables a year here. Now, last year, I talked up Oklahoma a little bit. I thought that Venables had a chance to do more in his first year than he did. Proved to be wrong on that. I'm not quite ready to throw out Oklahoma just yet. But if they don't have much of a better year this year than they had before, that could be troubling. You could be right on that. That could be troubling. I'd also tell you, keep your eye on that Oklahoma quarterback situation. The freshman they have, he could be really good. He may be the best freshman quarterback in the he may be the best freshman quarterback there is. Jerry Dog fan said, did I see the bad weather on the cruise? I saw the video of that. I really thought that was kind of much ado about nothing. That was one of those viral videos that people sort of try to make into something. Wind blows. I thought that was very much overblown. I really, no pun intended, I guess. Because I'd heard about that and then went to see it myself, and I didn't think there was too much going on with that. Pizza Man says, how's my Friday going? Listen, my Friday and every day is great. Things are great in my world. I appreciate you asking, but things are absolutely, absolutely terrific. By the way, if you're thinking about, decisions for you, anything about later this evening for something like that, All right. Final trip around the comment section we're going to go for today. Don't forget, we're going to be here on Monday, so y'all better be here too. If I want to be here, y'all better be here. DT says the term is playing with their food. Yeah, that's kind of the phrase people kind of use these days. Georgia was definitely kind of caught playing with their food a little bit against Missouri. Randy Hall says Nakobe Dean's been listed as kind of a breakout linebacker for the Eagles this year. I hope that's the case. Let's see what else. Randy Hall, I don't know that we're going to do live video today. Like, I kind of want to hang out with my family tonight, but I would imagine that sometime over the next few days, we may be doing live video at least once or twice. No disrespect to you, Weenie, but I don't think if I try to tell my wife that I'm not doing Friday dinner with our family, I think she might be a little upset about that. So if you don't mind, we may not do live video if Weenie announces tonight, which I certainly hope he does. I think he's a very good player. But I'm kind of hoping not to do that on a Friday night, just to be completely honest with you. Alan Vrbanchik says I'm supposed to end it on Facebook. Okay, I'll end it on Facebook here in a minute. Alan, I'll come back and I'll end it on Facebook in a minute. Let's see what else. Let us see what else. Barry Watkins ready to see Georgia eat off the floor this year. I like that. Oh, it sounds like Miriam's going to Boston. That's really cool. Really fun. All right, anything else before we go? I'll come back to Facebook in a minute. Let me go back over to YouTube, see if they're still arguing about the same stuff. Jerry Dog Fan, you have a great weekend there as well. Jay Shipes checking out. G Grace there as well. B.A. Ty Stone Cold Style looking at a Clemson-Michigan matchup. Is that a playoff prediction right there? Enrique Murillo says, don't forget to hate a Gator. I like that. Michael Porter says, stay safe. Yeah, no water skiing accidents like our buddy Jake Fromm once had. Enrique Murillo, we'll see you on Monday there as well. All right, back on Facebook to close things out because that's what I was asked to do. On Facebook, Philip Jordan Wells in here having fun as always. Barry Watkins having fun there as well. Kevin Cook says, happy wife, happy life. Yeah, so like that's kind of always our tradition. Like we have families just sort of develop these sort of weird traditions. One of ours is that we always have like Friday night dinner together as a family. And like in the football season, when I'm doing high school football on Friday, we kind of move that typically to Wednesday. And that's sort of just our time to be together. And not to say we don't have dinner the other nights sometimes too. Most of the nights we do. But that's just sort of like that sort of protected time, if you will. And actually, my kids would be mad as anything about that if we messed up that. So we're to look forward to doing all of that here. But I certainly hope that Michael Uini does join up. And maybe when he does, he'll make sure he confirms that pronunciation there on that. So we will see on all of that. So watch the recruiting stuff here over the course of the next couple of days. We'll see how that plays out. Back here on Monday, off on Tuesday, and then rolling along again like normal on Wednesday. By the way, I'll finish with this. Alan Vrbanchik says a three-peat puts Kirby Smart in a different category. And I do think that's important to keep in mind with this upcoming season. That you're talking about such a rare level of history that's kind of in play here for Georgia. So that's why I'm going to speak as a fan here exclusively for a moment. That's why I don't care what schedule Georgia's playing, and I don't care about anything sort of, whatever else anybody else may be saying right now, that Georgia is playing over the course of the next however many months, next 15 games, to be put into a category of success that no one else in modern college football history will have been able to touch. Yes, we've seen Alabama win back-to-back in 2011 and 2012, and yes, we've seen two-time national champs thus far in the playoff era, but this is 3 straight. And if it's also a 15-0 season along the way towards doing that, it is. It's a different category of achievement. It's more than just one national championship. It's more than just 50% more national championships in the Kirby Smart era. It's more than that. It is the most dominant stretch run, I believe, that any team's ever been on. You want to compare Florida State, doing top 5, however many years ago they did that, 10, 11 years, whatever that was. Bama winning 2 straight national championships. Miami collection of national championships over a course of a number of years. I don't believe anything would be the same as 3 straight. It would be the most dominant achievement in our college football lifetimes. So that is truly what's at stake for Georgia this upcoming season. I think Alan's absolutely right about that. All right, so we'll come back. We'll talk plenty more about that in the days to come. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews cool down. We appreciate that. And we appreciate you sharing your thoughts and feedback. And we're always happy to be a receptacle for all of that. So y'all have a good weekend. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They will show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that, including getting that air conditioning unit tuned up to factory fresh specs. If you don't, you will wish you had. And so they can do it for you, and it may only cost you $99. So please find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. See you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We will look forward to talking to you then.